Now, I know Dr. Atz very personally, I mean, and very much a professional and my colleague. And I have great respect for Dr. Atz, right? But I think that Dr. Atz can speak for Dr. Atz. Dr. Atz cannot speak for the whole. And as I said, and even I shared with Dr. Raghunath yesterday, we were having a small sidebar conversation. When you appoint, okay, let me ask this question. What qualifies all nine of them, but even disqualifies me as a political scientist or Dr. Raghunath as a political scientist, right? To be asked to sit as an independent senator. I think I have the acumen, I have the capacity, I have the knowledge. I could sit down and debate, I could advise, I can vote for or against the government as well. Why not? The point is this: when you are the president and you have nine persons, yes, I agree that you need a medical person. There are certain things that I need in the Senate, right? So you need a lawyer, you need a health professional in some instance, but you need a lawyer, you need a finance person, you need an energy person, right? And then if you cover those three in particular, you can have a social worker. I think it is important to have a political and international relations specialist of some sort in the mix and that sort of thing to have a balance. I agree with um, the person who has a disability and always having someone who sits on the bench that has a disability to be able to relate and whatnot. I think it should have a youth person there that will be able to speak to young people. That is my choices if I were to make the decision. The choice is the president's decision. I agree that they sometimes, I still believe that they're independent. I will not say they're the president's, the president's choice, but it sits in the remit of the president. In fact, up to this day, nobody could answer me on how do you put yourself forward to Her Excellency or His Excellency the President to be considered to be an independent senator. How does that happen, right? I don't know. And there's no process there. There's nothing that I can find in the research that says that you can reach out to the office of the president and indicate your willingness to serve or any of that sort, right? So that's something we need to address. But you must not become predictable. I look at the nine of them. And Dr. Raghunath even said, he said, well, how you can say that? I said, because there are some people, when they enter the political arena, by their tone, by their positioning. So, for example, Dr. Desiree Murray yesterday abstained from the bill, from voting on the motor vehicles bill, because she did not agree that the timeline was realistic enough from 3 to 7 days. She wanted it to be 21 to 42 days based on her personal or her trajectory, right? Maybe it should be 14 days, it shouldn't be 7 days because we lackadaisical and we have to change the system and we have to change behaviors and all of that in Trinidad and Tobago. That's fine. So there comes when you're making a judgment, there's a level of realism and realistic and pragmatism, I should say, not realism. There's a level of pragmatism in the approach. But there are behaviors that emerges that one can predict that someone is most likely or highly probable to say no. Whereas someone like Dr. Atz, someone like Senator Choate, who is seasoned in this thing, might be someone who you can, convince or you can meet in the middle line and that sort of thing. And that's one of the things that I said to the media yesterday. Everybody's throwing the onus on the government. It's always on the government, the government, the government. It doesn't matter which government it is, the government. But some and I make no apologies for saying this either. For me, in my observations, when it's the UNC government or any opposing party that becomes the government, NAR, UNC1, UNC2 partnership, whatever, there is a concerted effort to cause a large societal disruption. This place has become communication chaotic. I have continuously said the government needs to put a proper framework in place. I don't think that it is sufficient. I don't think that it is working enough to be able to dispense some of this information that is being peddled and misinformation because the agents of the PNM, as I mentioned before, are in active mode. Sometimes one of these people sleep, right? With that in mind, it is important, therefore, that the onus is not always on the government. The government can propose. The government could lay policy. It could explain direction that they want to go. But if I am an independent senator and I don't agree with clauses 5, 6, and 7 of a bill, what prevents me? Because they are not a collective. They don't have to collectively. They don't have caucus, right? They don't caucus as and because they're independent individually, they can vote for or against and abstain as the case may be. They can vote collectively as a block. They can vote against as a block, whatever the case may be. But nothing stops me from picking up the phone as senator and saying to the attorney general, as AG, there are some concerns I have with the bill, clauses 5, 6, and 7. Will you be willing to meet at the Red House in one of the committee offices, secretary, in any of the offices, right? That is there for us to be able to sit down and converse and have a meeting. There are a few of my colleagues who want to, and I could also send a WhatsApp message to my colleagues. Listen, on my own volition, I propose to meet with the Attorney General on my issue, which is 5, 6, and 7. If anybody wish to join me to also, indicate a concern so that we could at least trash it out before, that is available to them. We have the Red House that has 2 chambers, but there are also many other offices and many other sitting spaces that allow for committee meetings and for meetings of that kind. It is for them to utilize it. And that also comes with knowledge and experience and all of that. So predictability is one, proactivity is another one, understanding your role and function is another one. And another thing that is in our, not necessarily in our constitution, but is a convention. Normally, before cabinet meets, in the past presidents and past prime ministers have met on a Wednesday evening at President's House, converse about the plans the government has, the policies the government has, where they at, where the government requires the president to interject X, Y, and Z. Has that happened? Has that ever happened in this instance? In the last 9 months, has the president invited the prime minister to sit and have a conversation, right? Those are things that we need to also go back to in terms of norms of governance. So those are questions that needs to be answered. It comes back to my perspective on predictability. When you become predictable in politics, then there are certain behaviors that you have practiced and that is common. And that we could brave from now till thy kingdom come. We could try to bring down the onus more and more. We could try to meet you at the middle ground 100 times. No matter what we try to do, you will always say no. And those are certain realities that we have. There are some that we can depend on and some that we can't depend on. That's just how it is. And when I say we, I mean the society, right? That said, the bill has, and the model has proven to be a success. And nothing is perfect. I keep saying that there are commentators that are finding the flaws in why it didn't work or why it hasn't reached the goal that it wants in Jamaica. If anybody knows about politics in Jamaica, sociology and political sociology in Jamaica, they will know that crime was one of the most critical things that, and there were streets in Kingston and there are parts of Kingston and Jamaica that people could not go to. But they can now. Their politics was one where the orange versus the green descended into blues. It descended into violence. It descended into licks, right? Serious adversarial behaviors has emerged out of Jamaica that has now, it has now settled. So the society in itself has developed, and therefore, in addition to that, the sociology of the island in terms of the goal of the government in bringing down crime, because Jamaica remains a very important, tourism is very crucial to Jamaica's brand, was something that they need to work on, and they have. So if it's worked in Jamaica and it has brought the crime rate down significantly, then building off of the wins and the strategies that they may have implemented during the state of emergency, then we should give the ZOSO an opportunity to succeed or to fail. And if it does fail, the masses will say, the police will say, the forces will say, and the government will have no choice but to admit. But they will also give themselves an opportunity to see the whys, the hows, the what's caused it to succeed or fail. We can't say no to something when we haven't tried it. And if you have concerns about it, then the onus is on you to contact the person because you have low costs. You have low cost standard. If I have, if I am a political scientist and if I have an issue, I can pick up the phone and call the minister and say, Minister, there's this issue happening in X or Y. Call the Minister of Works and Transport and say, Minister, there's this happening. Call the Minister of Public Utilities and say, a line bus in the middle of the road in this road for 3 weeks now and water like it going out the side in the road and it gets fixed. And the same way that I have that ability, don't you think the person who has a title of senator to their name has greater locus than I do? And Trinidad is a small place. So what is the problem with regard to us communicating what the issues are and meeting ourselves in some forum, right? That's one. As it pertains to the energy chamber, I was very, very surprised and I was very actually enlightened that former Minister Carolyn Sipasad-Bertrand said that during her tenure as Minister of Energy, she stopped all public sector investment and support into the Energy Chambers Conference. And I agree with it. You cannot tell me that National Gas Company injects just under $750,000 annually into the energy conference, but there's no return on their investment. What is the return on the investment? Where was the voice of the energy chamber when the government proposed to close down Petrotrin, send home workers with no contingency plan? Did the energy chamber robustly and vociferously come out and say to the government and the minister, this is a bad idea? Maybe we should start looking at a private sector model or a business model by which you could restructure, because umpteen businesses and frameworks go through this. You go through a restructuring process, a retrenchment and rehiring process without collapsing the operations of the business completely. Why couldn't we do that? Right? So that's one. And I have created, in light of that, 6 questions that I will put to you all to put out there because I want it to be answered by the Energy Chamber or any representative of them. 1. How has the Energy Chamber advocated for the sustainability of the state-owned energy companies in Trinidad and Tobago? And what have they done to partner with those state-owned energy companies to ensure its long-term profitability and sustainability? That's 1. What policies, if any, has the Energy Chamber proposed to past government or present government in national interest? That's 2. What has the Energy Chamber executed in the past to protect, bolster, and improve the national energy sector of Trinidad and Tobago? Because as far as I'm concerned, everybody running over to Ghana and forget that Trinidad and Tobago exists. The next thing is, what is the position of the Energy Chamber on the issue of Nutrien and their current impasse with the government of Trinidad and Tobago? All because the government has opted to start collecting the fees that has been owed to the government of Trinidad and Tobago since 2020. What is the position of the chamber? Because Nutrien sits as a member of the chamber, but more so, Nutrien is on the board, has a representative on the board. So what is the issue there? Because Nutrien continues to threaten and threaten and threaten and threaten, as if they could, as an MNC, put a rope around the neck of the government of Trinidad and Tobago and decide they could dictate to Kamla Prasad-Bisasa as to what they could do or cannot do. So that's the next question. But outside of PAN, because you have Shell Invaders, you have Nutrien Silver Stars, and whoever else, but outside of PAN, what are the Energy Chamber's ESG and CSR plans and proposals for 2026 and beyond, and what have they done in the past? And my last question is, has the Energy Chamber put forward a partnership plan with the government of Trinidad and Tobago to move the energy sector forward beyond 2026? If those 6 questions could be put down in an answer, rather than a superficial response from DAX, that about or about how about the energy chamber continues to be a partner and advocate. That for me is nonsense. I want to know the what, the when, the how, the why. I want to see what you've done. And if you can't answer that to me, who's an academic asking academic questions, then the Prime Minister has a right to shut all it out.